So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to reveal to you what we, in essence, at a high level, cover in the UX strategy program, because what we're talking about here is how we're going to influence those big decisions, the decisions that cause those frustrations, so that we can get beyond that, so that we're no longer frustrated about that. So to do that, we need to sort of talk about what a big decision is, right? So we can think of a big decision as any decision that determines the goals or strategies of an organization. And the those decisions are things that have multiple facets, right? They can be product decisions, like what will the new features do? How will they work? What are the architectural constraints that we're going to have to work within? They can be strategic decisions, like who are the customers and what will they pay for this? They can be internal decisions, such as who is going to be on the project and when does this thing need to ship? And all these decisions affect the user experience, which is why UX leaders are always so anxious about these decisions. Because if the decisions get made and they aren't made the right way, they actually make it far more difficult to deliver a great product than if the decisions get made in a way that really serves the needs of the users, that really helps them go forward. And one of the sort of attributes of big decisions is that they almost always need to be made really early in the project. They are the sort of foundational decisions that get made right up front. Deciding who is going to be on the project has to be made before you have the project, right? You can't start a project if you don't know who's on the project team. Deciding when it needs to ship is required because practically all of the business revolves around knowing when, for instance, revenue can start coming in from this work, which is going to pay the bills. You know, understanding who the customers are, understanding what it will do, understanding how it's going to work. All of these things need to be nailed down, because if they aren't nailed down early in the process, they delay people's ability to act, right? You can't start on a project that has absolutely no definition. So you need to make some decisions. The issue isn't that the decisions are being made. The issue is that decisions are being made without people who have input that could be valuable in making those decisions better. One of the things about big decisions is that by the time many people learn about them, they're often presented as if they are settled facts, right? We are told what the product will do. We are told who the customer will be. We are told what we're expecting the business model to be. We are told who is going to be on the project and who's available to work on it and how, you know, when it needs to be done. All of these things have been settled beforehand. And this is often before any member of the UX team is involved, which makes the UX team reacting to these problems, not contributing to the decision-making process. And that's where the struggle comes from. One of the big issues is that once these things are decided, they can't be relitigated, right? The decision has to stand. If you constantly waver back and forth on a big decision, the project stalls. So they sort of, you know, if you think of a decision in terms of how fast the concrete around it solidifies, these are quick curing concrete, right? This is These are decisions that once they are made, the concrete that supports them just hardens and you cannot change them. Another attribute of these big decisions is that they often come across as having no underlying rationale. Why did we pick this group of people to work on this project? Often there's no real reason other than maybe they were available, or the senior leader knew their names. And that's the crux of them. If there is a rationale, few people know what that rationale is. So it doesn't bubble its way down to the people who are confronted with working within the constraints of these big decisions. And the last attribute that I'm going to bring up is that these big decisions were not in any obvious way informed by any user research. And that's where we get into trouble, because we get into situations where subsequent research quickly informs us that the decisions were probably not made the right way, right? The right way being they are not going to get the result that the organization is hoping they will get. And that is problematic. So this process, right, of making big decisions, these are absolutely critical to the success of the project, and yet they aren't being made with all the information they could have been made with, much of which will actually, if they'd had it when they made the decisions might have been made completely differently. And that's sort of the crux of the frustration. So how can we influence those big decisions with the knowledge that we could gain from user research? Now, if we think of user research as a knowledge acquisition tool, we can talk to this idea that really what user research is something that helps us grow our understanding of who the users are, what they're trying to accomplish, what their challenges are, what their current experience is, where they are frustrated or delighted, and what would improve their lives. These are the things that if we have a solid, deep understanding of this, they would potentially drive those big decisions in a different direction. The reason is because when big decisions get made without any user research, the folks who are making those decisions are really just guessing. Guessing is basically the absence of any user research. When we guess, when we don't have user research to say, who the users are, we guess who the users will be. When we don't have any research that says what they're trying to accomplish, we guess what we think they need to accomplish. When we don't have any research that tells us what the challenges are, we make up challenges and then try to solve them. There's a story floating around. I just ran across it in somebody's blog, and Bruce McCarthy, who is a friend of mine, mentioned it also the other day in a conversation we were having, of a team that they make APIs for other software developers. So basically, companies that buy their product get an application programming interface to use to be able to use the functionality. It's an outsourced service, and So you build it into your app or website, and you can use the functionality. Think about something like a mapping service that has an API, and you can then produce maps on your interface. Well, they were not getting the response. They were not getting the uptake they had hoped for from their product. So they immediately decided that what must be the problem is that the toolkit was too big, and that they needed to reduce the size of the toolkit. Well, to reduce the size of the toolkit, they had to invest all of this money, all of this effort into re-architecting the entire toolkit that the programmers who were using this service were downloading and installing. And so they started that re-architecting. They invested quite a lot of it. They got a preliminary version of it. And then they went out and started talking to their customers, talking to the developers who were using this toolkit. And when they got to those developers who were the users of the toolkit, they quickly found out that the size of the toolkit wasn't causing any issues. What was causing the issues was the complexity of getting it running. That if you figured out how to get the toolkit running, if you figured out how to use it the first time, it actually installed pretty fast and downloaded fast and did all the things it needed to do. The issue was that it was just really hard to get started because the documentation sucked. So they had invested all of this effort and all of these resources, and therefore all of this money, in solving a problem that was based on a guess without having the information that it was a documentation issue. Once they upgraded the documentation, everything fell into place. And suddenly they saw a huge uptick. I'm sure you've heard stories like this 1,000 times. We often solve the wrong problem because we are guessing. Another type of guess, shipping a feature that we believe would be popular and then nobody uses it. Crickets. That's a major risk. How major? Well, Warner Media just pulled this trick where they created a whole new online network for CNN called CNN Plus, cost them millions and millions of dollars to build this thing out. They shipped it, and crickets. They actually canceled CNN Plus less than a month after it launched because they'd only gotten a couple thousand people signing up for this thing. It was a complete business failure. And it was a business failure because they didn't do the research. User research has strategic business value. It predicts success or failure. It predicts how customers will respond to what we deliver. So we can think of user research as a prediction tool. It mitigates risk. It increases the odds of success. It completely causes us to fail if we don't do it. It provides insight into what will be successful. And it very much increases our shared understanding of the problems that users have that we need to focus on. When we focus on users' problems and we make their problems go away, we create a much more valuable product, a much more valuable service. So we need to grow our ability to find solutions. And when we're just guessing, we are basically just throwing it at the wall, right? We're throwing spaghetti at the wall. That's what I meant to say. And the I knew what I was trying to say. How come you didn't know what I was trying to say? When we are failing to do user research, we are just throwing spaghetti at the wall. We are just hoping to get a solution. Here, let me give you an example. Imagine you're in a strange city, and the whole reason you're there is to go to a wedding. You're in your hotel room. The wedding starts in an hour. You need to get to the venue. But you have no idea where the venue is. You don't know anything about the city. But you just get in your car and you start driving, right? You drive in a direction because it feels like the right direction. You make some turns because it feels like the right turns. You're basing this entirely on your gut, right? After all, the wedding venue, it's got to be over here. What are the odds that you are going to get to the wedding? They're probably pretty slim. Let's say it's important that you're there. Maybe it's a close family member. Maybe it's your wedding, right? How big a risk would it be if you couldn't show up? So of course we would do research. We would get maps. We'd get a tool that would give us directions. We'd actually maybe do a dry run the night before to make sure we knew where to go. We might research on where there might be traffic or construction, right? We would do a whole bunch of work to reduce the odds, to mitigate risk, to grow our understanding of where problems could come up so that we know where we're trying to go. Yet this process is of just sort of getting in the car and going where it feels right is how so many organizations deliver products. And then we're shocked when it turns out that we don't deliver something that anybody wants, or that it causes all sorts of downstream issues for us. So we need to make these big decisions with research. But the problem is that oftentimes the research doesn't start until after the big decisions are made. And we have to fix that. So here's how we fix that. We have to start having the research happen in advance of the decision moment. The decision moment is that moment where that decision is going to be made. And the research has to be in place before that. To do that, we're going to need to ensure that we're focusing on the right problems. Not necessarily the right solutions, but the right problems. And we need to have a very mature research practice that is all about getting to the heart of those problems. And finally, we need to be thinking strategically, not tactically. We need to be thinking about what is it that the organization needs from our research before they need it. Now, one way to think about this is to go with the UX strategy schematic that I'm always drawing, right? This is this diagram that I use all the time. And if you've hung around, you've seen me draw it a million times. But what we're shooting for, right? So when teams start, they focus on a solution, right? They focus on something they're going to deliver. But that thing that they're going to deliver, that's just putting it out. Warner Media did a great job delivering CNN Plus. They shipped it. It was great. Nobody used it, right? So there's an outcome that needs to happen here. And that outcome we want to think of as a UX outcome. And the emphasis is on the X, on the experience. We want an experience that's going to improve people's lives. So what is the improvement for that thing, right? What was it that CNN Plus needed to deliver that would make people's lives better that it didn't deliver? So the the solution feeds into the outcome. Either it gets us the outcome or it doesn't. And we're going to increase our ability to get the outcome if we've done the research. But the research has to happen early on. It has to happen before the solution. So where does it start? It starts with the customer's experience. And the customer experience focuses us on frustration and delight. Remember that all user experience can be measured in terms of a scale of deep frustration to extreme delight. And we can look and see which parts are delightful of the experience, which parts are frustrating, and we can look for patterns that users have, discovering the patterns where, many users tend to find that things are frustrating in common places. And so the more we understand where that frustration is, the better. Now, the current experience, I wrote customer experience. I've only done this 1,000 times. The current experience is this path. The outcome is basically what it looks like if we succeed at eliminating the frustration and making it delightful all the way across. Now we can, once we have an assessment of what the current experience is, these are the places where the users need us to make improvements. We can now ask the question, why aren't they getting that improvement automatically? Why can't they just go ahead and make things better for themselves? And the reason is because we haven't solved some important problems. So there are some problems we need to solve. So that's the schematic, right? We go from the current experience to understanding the problems. Those are the things that are preventing the users from getting the outcomes automatically. Those problems, once we have a solid understanding of them, they help us generate solutions. The better the understanding, the faster we get solutions. The reason solutions take so long when we don't do research is that we don't understand the problems. We don't understand the experience. So we're just guessing. And then the problem with guessing is you just have to guess 1,000 times. It's like, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 1,000. Is it 1? Nope. Is it 2? Nope. Is it 3? Nope. We're just going to keep guessing. And, eventually we'll hit it, but it's going to take a really long time. If we do some research, we can narrow down the scope, and suddenly we know what the solutions are. I've never met a team that if they had a clear understanding of the problem, they couldn't come up with a solution. And so this becomes key. And so when we're talking about user research, what we're talking about is this process. Most people build a very simple user research that focuses, use a different color, that focuses over here. Did we build the solution correctly? But this is a problem that we're only focusing on the solution. We didn't ask the question, is it the right solution? And that's because we didn't ask the question, are we working on the right problem? This distinction between the right problem, the right solution, and did we build it right, this comes from Jen Cardello. And if you haven't seen her talk about this, I highly recommend it. There's a link in the notes to her presentation. And she lays this out. She's head of research for Fidelity Investments. And when she got there, she figured that that they were spending about 85% of their time, their research effort, their research investment on just building it right. And this is, unfortunately, very tactical. And in the period of a year, she was able to shift that investment so that they were no longer spending 85% here. They were spending the 85% on the right problem and only 15% on the right solution. And when you spend it on the right problem, you become incredibly strategic. Because now you are setting the agenda for the organization. Some of these problems are going to be easy to solve, but a lot of these problems are going to take a fair amount of investment. And that's going to make a huge difference. So the shift, the way we're going to influence the big decisions is by really shifting our research investment to be 85% or more on the understanding the current experience, making sure everybody understands that current experience, and solving the right problems. And part of this means that we have to build up our research maturity. We're going to talk about this at length next Monday in the advanced approaches to UX research. But the basic maturity model is this. It goes from stage 0 to stage 6. And stage 0 is an organization that does no research at all. Everything is guessing, right? No research, all guesses. Or as the Texans say, all hat, no cows. And the so that's where we start. Stages 1 and 2 are basic usability testing. And usability testing, for the most part, that's this build it right stuff. So that's all this tactical. This is where usability testing is. And you can't usability test your way to strategy. Stages 3, 4, and 5, these are all ethnographic techniques. And basically, as you mature, you are growing your strategic ability. And stage 6 is when you get fully strategic. And this is when you are at the point where you are influencing big decisions because you have really grown your expertise. And what that means is you have become world-renowned experts in the current experience and the problems to solve. You are the world's biggest experts in these two things. Not just you and your team, but everybody in the organization. Because what that means is that at the moment that the big decisions are made, the research has already been done and everybody is aware of it. Now, it's hard to bootstrap this, right? The first time the organization comes into existence, it's going to be hard to have that research already done. Though, here's the funny thing about that. Almost all businesses that come into existence are startups, and almost all startups are started by people who already have experience in the problems because they came out of the world where the problems weren't solved. And so those things grow. And so that's where it's key. As far as this maturity goes, I go into more depth on this in the notes, and we'll get into even more depth next week. But each of these various maturity steps gets us more and more strategic over time. The other thing to note is that it's not a either qual or quant thing. It's both qualitative and quantitative. But it's not the way people think of qualitative and quantitative. A lot of people, I hear this all the time, and it's just wrong, right? I hear quantitative tells you what people are doing, and qualitative research tells you why they do it. That unfortunately is myth. That's not true at all. You will never learn what people are doing from quantitative research. You may think you are. You may be making inferences, but you're actually guessing as to what they're actually doing. You can't tell if someone is, if you're looking at analytics for a e-commerce site, you can't tell when someone has an intention to buy or when they're just window shopping or when they've ended up on a page by mistake. You can't tell the difference to any of those. They all look the same in the numbers. So it doesn't tell you why or what they're doing. And therefore you get stuck. Here's what it does. Qualitative will tell you what is happening and why it's happening. That's when you sit with people and you actually watch them use your product or do their work. They will tell you what makes it delightful and what makes it frustrating. And then quantitative data will tell you about the scale and severity of that. How many people have similar experiences? How much do frustrating experiences end up costing the organization? How much work is going to be needed to resolve these issues? When you understand that, the metrics and the numbers become far more useful, because now you can really use that to make those big decisions. If you know that right now, the biggest thing that's costing your organization support costs is your ability to onboard new customers, you invest in onboarding new customers. But if you don't know that, you might guess that the reason you're not doing it is, well, maybe the download times are too long instead of the documentation, and you make mistakes. That's where the issues come in. So we want to focus on the maturity of our research, because when we have organic research processes that let us in on what's happening with users, we can find inefficiencies that are in our users' lives. We can find where it's the documentation that's the problem, not the downloads. And suddenly we can then innovate, right? Innovation is basically any solution to a problem that no one else has ever given you before. If you take something that's frustrating and you eliminate that frustration, your users will tell you you are being innovative. And that's always the way you get more value, the way you get people to give you more money, which is going to help the business, which is going to get everybody excited. So if we want research to influence big decisions, we need to strategically use advanced research techniques. We need to become the world's foremost experts on our customers, our users, their needs, and their challenges. We need to ensure that we're building a shared understanding across the entire organization on that expertise. We need to anticipate the big decisions before they're made. And we need to make it a priority to assess risk as early as possible after the decision is made, before the cement hardens, so that if it turns out that the decision was made wrong, we can adjust. This is focusing the majority of our research efforts on identifying the right problems, not on building it right. And next week in our intensive, we're going to walk through exactly how to do that. If you weren't here at the beginning, next week, all week, we have our advanced approaches to UX research intensive. It's happening Monday through Friday, and we've got a whole bunch of plannings. On Monday, we're going to talk about research maturity. On Tuesday, we're going to talk about how we affect the roadmap being one of those big decisions. On Wednesday, we're going to talk about continuous research, which is how we get into the cycle of having research done before the big decisions are made. On Thursday, we're going to talk about how we actually build up our capability to mature our research. And our Friday, we're going to talk about how we use the research to influence those decisions with the key stakeholders. We have the whole week planned out to do this. And you can attend this for free if you want. You just join up with the intensive and you'll get the full schedule and you'll get all the resources and everything. However, I want to point out that if this is something that you feel like you can make happen in your organization, if you just had the right tools and you just had someone to support you, then I want you to consider the VIP program. The VIP program is how we support folks who are ready to push this forward. And so if you want to do that, you get train the trainer sessions, you get unstuck session. There's a session that's Thursday, I think, which is when Leslie is going to be coaching people in the VIP program to get the most out of the intensive so that they can show their management why this is worth doing and how to make it happen. You get extended access to the notes, you get extended support, mentorship, coaching, and advice. All of that happens with the VIP program. It's really a good deal. We charge $97 for just you to do this, or $147 for you and your entire team. So it's less than the cost of 2 people to bring it to the entire organization if you want. We've had people come to our intensives and bring 50, 60 people from their organization. And you know what? It works. It really happens. So if you are ready to make this happen, then please, by all means, get to join the VIP program, get the month-long access to the notes and the recordings, get into the train the trainer sessions and the unstuck sessions, get your hour with Leslie, which I tell you, we bill out a lot of money for that time. It's included in this price, way more than you're going to pay. So all of this is part of the intensive. And you can find all of that at research.centercenter.com. Summer just posted the link in the notes. And that's what we're doing next week. And then the week after, we're going to start back up with our Monday Talk UX strategy sessions, where you have a whole bunch that we're thinking about for the next spring. We'll have the calendar up probably by the end of this week. So if you want to get access to that calendar, there's a link in the bottom of the notes, today's notes. So if you just scroll down to the bottom, you'll find something that says a link, events calendar, and you can copy that link into your calendar for subscribing to a new calendar. There's instructions in there how to do it with Google Calendar. There's instructions for the poor souls who have to use Outlook. And so that is available to you. Okay. As we often do, we're going to take questions past the top of the hour. So if you can stick around, we'll take your question and we will answer it as best we can. If you asked a question and you can't stick around, just let Alyssa know and she will She won't ask it, but you can always put it in the Leaders of Awesomeness community. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have there. But let's take some questions. Alyssa, how are you? How was your holiday weekend?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it was a really good weekend. It was kind of rainy down here in Florida, but can't complain. How's yours?
It was beautiful, actually, the entire weekend. We had a really beautiful weekend. I got out hiking and spent some time with my best friend, who's this wonderful 6-year-old. We cooked dinner together on Saturday night. It was macaroni and marinara sauce, but he was very excited because he got to squeeze the tomatoes to make the marinara sauce. You know, good marinara sauce always has hand squeezed tomatoes, so it was fun. Anyways, that was my weekend. Uh, um, uh, do we have a question?
Yes. So we have a question from Patty Chavez, and their question is, how can we advance a company's UX research maturity if the outcome of ineffective or stunted research is perceived as successful? If slash when UX research isn't present at the big decision event or table, there seems to be opportunity for poor measurements for what success looks like. So how
Oh, that's a good challenge. Patty, do you have more to say about that?
Not really. I'm finding that a company that I'm consulting with, there's kind of this idea of iterative research. So we kind of get a taste of a direction and then keep going forward, but we don't really, there's not allowed a lot of time to return to that research to continue to flesh it out. So there's kind of this kind of negotiation between agile and research, and it's not really going as successfully as it could be, it seems.
Um, uh, what sort of things, you don't have to get into detail because it's a client, you shouldn't talk about clients here, but can you give us a hint as to what the the market is, or who the users might be of what it is they build?
Sure. Just general patients.
General patients.
Yep.
So medical patients.
Medical. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. So here's the thing, right? And this is the tactical thinking that gets us in trouble. And once we start thinking strategically, we realize there's a bigger picture here, right? There is some sort of product roadmap, I assume, even if it's not written down. Someone's got some ideas as to when you're done working on this thing, they're going to work on this other thing next. And I'm assuming that's true. If that's not true, we can take this conversation in a slightly different direction, but most of the time that's true.
It's true, at least in this case.
Okay, good. If it wasn't true, it's actually good news, because we get to say what's going to happen next, because we can use the things you're uncovering in the research. So the trick is to not treat the research like it's only for this sprint, but to treat the research that its entire purpose is to inform every related decision going forward, and to actually scope it that way. And so if you're dealing with a product that's intended to be used by medical patients, and it solves some sort of problem that medical patients have, your immediate sprint probably deals with a very narrow focus. It's like, how do I input my phone number? Have we created the phone number input screen correct, or whatever it is, choosing a medication, or reporting a detail back to their doctor, or whatever it does, right? So we're focused on that narrow thing, and that's great. But we're going to have some time with these people, these patients. And in the process of having time, we're going to learn insights. And what you mentioned, that you uncover some glimmers of things that could be useful, but you never get a chance to go back and research it. But that's not entirely true. Because if you identify which of those glimmers are in the roadmap coming up, you are literally going to go back and research it. And what you can start to do is ask the question, or maybe not even ask, just, seek forgiveness when you act, of saying, because we're going to come back to this when we work on the next feature, at least this aspect of it, I'm going to use our research time now to actually expand our knowledge on that next feature and use that opportunity to grow the direction that we're going in and start to model the behavior that we're not just researching for the current question, but we're always researching to become real experts. And this is the trick. This is the thing. When you're focused on research over here, you always learn things about what's going on over here. You almost always just screen them out because they're not relevant to this. What if you started collecting it? What if you started keeping a catalog of what the current research is and what the problems are that you need to solve, and how well the solutions you've come up with so far have solved them, and where they've fallen short? And that, because every time you learn something that the solution doesn't do to get the outcome, it increases your knowledge of the problem. And so the trick is, it becomes a storytelling assignment. Can you start to tell stories about what the current experience is like and what the problems are? You can take any time you produce a great solution as a win to solving that, but then quickly come back and say, but there are more problems to solve because there's stuff over here and there's stuff over here, and we need to solve those eventually too. Does that make sense, Patty?
Yeah, it does. It seems kind of like almost a different level of scope to return to that research and
that's exactly it. We're going to talk about this next Wednesday when we get into continuous research. But what we really want to do is get to the point where when a sprint starts, you can dump onto the sprint an incredible amount of knowledge that you've already collected about the subject matter of that sprint, because you have you've already started the research process, and you're not starting each sprint as if you know nothing about the users or what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, once you start building it up and you make that habit, it's so valuable to have that information that the organization wants you to invest more and more and more into that. Does that help?
Definitely. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Okay, it's the top of the hour, but we're going to go another 15 minutes or so. So we're going to keep taking questions. So if you have questions, put them in the chat thingy, and we will definitely take them and we'll go from there. So Alyssa, do we have another question?
Yes, this next question is from Kathy Pages. They asked, how do you align product stakeholders around the value of the research results so that we build the right product and not a diluted solution? We research and begin early design work, and develop and product managers say that they cannot build it due to capacity or project prioritization. Even if the research shows us the problem to solve, they push back on nearly everything.
Okay, Kathy, can you say a little bit more about this?
Sure. We have a pretty mature research group on the product design and UX team where I work. And, for example, we did a big research study in Q1 around subscriber onboarding. We got alignment from stakeholders across the organization on the need to do that. We started early design iterations and thinking things through from a UI UX standpoint. And we just, there's a lot of things we have to fix to make it work the way we want it to work. And the reaction is, well, we can't do this because of this. We can't do this because of this. And these pipes don't connect. And there's a lot of there's a lot of, well, what's the low hanging fruit we could do now? Which is always good, you know, it's good to build in phases, but what ends up happening is those typically development doesn't want to prioritize that because it's maybe a bigger lift. It might take a whole quarter to complete, and they would rather have some quick wins and keep things moving. So this is, I've never had this experience at any other place that I've worked, and would love your feedback on it.
Yeah. So where I go when I hear this is that the pushback you're getting is that they are thinking in a very immediate time frame, and that's not wrong because
Sure.
you know we
Yeah.
live in the now,
Mhm.
right? What you need to do is, it sounds like, is help them get some perspective that after now there's going to be a next, and after the next there's going to be a later. And so if they can't do it now, could they do it next? And if they can't do it next, could they do it later? And what you're basically doing here is building a roadmap. And you could take whatever roadmap the product team already has, and you could map it onto the things you found in your research. And you could say, okay, the product team has this roadmap that goes out, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years, whatever. Roadmaps tend not to go out more than 2 or 3 years. So they already have this roadmap. Are any of the things that you found in your research addressed in anywhere on that roadmap?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. Because now there's a couple of things that you can ask. One is you could say is, okay, what if we think twice as far as the roadmap goes? So if the roadmap goes 2 years, what if we think 4 years? Is it possible that we could address this problem in 4 years? Right? Could
Mhm.
we imagine having the time to deal with these problems in the next 4 years? Not in the next quarter, not in the next release cycle, but in the next 4 years. And you may get a yes, or you may get a no, or you may get, I don't know, it's too far out. So, well, let's
Right.
say we try. Okay. Let's say we make a goal that, you know, here it is, almost June 1st of 2022. We will have solved these big onboarding problems by May 31st of 2026. Can we make that a prior? If you think it's important, I mean, if you don't think it's important at all, then it's not important at all.
Right.
Right? But if it's important, we should be able to do something. And then you can backcast. You say, well, okay, what is the low-hanging fruit on the road to that vision of what it could be? Right? What are the things? There's a bunch of low-hanging fruit. What are the things that would be real quick fixes we could do right now that would be a baby step towards that 2026 date, that 2026 release? What are the things that we could do next? And how might we, if we know we're doing it next, how might we make sure the architecture is slowly shifting to support that? Right? If you have this piece of data over here and this piece of data over there, and you don't have the pipes to connect them, how can we start in baby steps to build the pipes? What if we did a pilot project that built just one of the pipes to see if we could make it work? Right? And start talking about the baby steps that it will take to get to that commitment in 2026. And then you can ask the question, maybe we could get it done faster. And there's one more aspect of this, which is what happens if you don't address it? What are the costs that are happening in the organization today because you are not addressing this? For example, you have people calling support, or you have a team of sales engineers that do nothing but solve this problem for customers all day long, and you have to pay them expensive salaries, and they burn out, and you have to hire new ones, and you have to train them, right?
Mhm.
What are those costs that you're already investing in because you're not solving the problem? Because what you really want to do is say, this isn't a new investment. This is just a shift from the costs of not fixing the problem to the costs of fixing the problem. And almost always, even when it's a really hard architectural problem, the cost of fixing it, because you only pay for that once, is much cheaper than the cost of letting it be an ongoing problem that you don't fix, because you pay for that every day. And you will continue to until you fix it. So could you even estimate those costs?
Yeah, we could definitely estimate them for sure.
So that's how I would tackle it.
That's a great point. Thank you so much. This was super helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, these are the types of conversations that we have in our UX strategy program, and we're going to get into great depth about that next week. So if you want to be part of that, you can let Leslie or Summer know, because they talk to people all the time who think this might be a good next step for them. Okay, Alyssa, who should we talk to next?
Next, we have Megan Matthews. Their question is, what guidance do you have for developing a user research mindset around measuring risk? How to think about it, how to talk about it, how to measure it, etc.
Oh, that's a great question. Megan, can you say more about where you're coming from?
Hi, thanks so much, Jared. So I'm coming from a fairly sophisticated, mature organization as far as the research teams go, as well as our research operations. And a hot topic that has come up is all around risk. And as we're sort of becoming more of this mature and sophisticated research organization, I am seeing, and we're becoming more strategic. I'm seeing more and more teams looking to the UX researchers to help the teams understand risk and how we're thinking about that and how to measure it, how to talk about it. So this is sort of a 101 kind of question, but I'm just kind of curious what guidance you have for researchers stepping into those shoes and helping teams to think about risk and prioritization and measuring it. Thank you.
When you say measure, can you say a little bit more about what you mean by measure?
Well, I guess my initial meaning, and maybe I'm not using the right terms, is how, depending on the stakeholder that you're talking to, they might have different criteria for how they're thinking about risk and how they themselves are measuring it, like the design org or the product org. And they might have different criteria that they use as like levers for what is risky or not risky. So that's kind of where I was coming from with that question.
Got it. Okay. So one way to think about this is all a measurement is. We get fixated on measurements being, these sort of calibrated instruments of quantity. But all a measurement is an observation of a change, right? When my kids were little, you can't see it, but over there's a door, and I would push the kids up against the door jamb. That sounded much more violent than it actually was, but I would gently push them up against the door jamb, and I would take a Sharpie and I would just mark where the top of their head is on the door jamb. And over time, I could see that my kids were getting taller. Now, I didn't take a ruler out, so I don't know how much taller. I don't have any precise calibration of a unit to measure this against, but I could clearly see that the direction was going in one direction. They were getting taller. And when they hit their teen years, I could see that it was a lot bigger gaps between the lines than it was when they were in their tinier years. So so that's a measurement, right? So one way to talk about measuring risk is where can we see risk and where can we see the changes in risk? So for example, we might have two different options. Could we assess the difference in terms of what we see between those in terms of some sort of risk? And a risk is basically things going in a direction that aren't good for us. So that means we need to have a conversation about what is a good direction and what is not a good direction, and what are the different attributes of things that we could see changes in. So revenue might be one, customers might be another, support calls might be another, sales might be another, lost sales is a sort of attribute of sales. So we can look and say, are lost sales increasing? That seems like the wrong way for this to go. Are support calls increasing? That's the wrong way for this to go. Is revenue decreasing? Are customers decreasing? We can look at the different things that we can see and we can detect that. And we can go so far as to talk about frustration and delight. Because when we do research and we talk to users, we can see when they're frustrated, we can see when they're delighted, and we can see that after this change, we saw a lot more frustration than we expected. Or after this change, we saw a lot more delight. And so our measurement of risk has to do with the changes either going in the direction we hoped or they not going in the direction we hoped. And being able to start to model that. And starting to model that, as I mentioned, research a prediction tool, is can we use small samples of research to actually help us figure out patterns that will be big changes that could show that we're either reducing risk or increasing risk. Does that help, Megan?
It does. I appreciate your time on this. So thank you.
Does that get you where you need to go, or is there something that's still outstanding that you're like, I wish I understood how to do X?
Well, I do think there's a lot. This is a meaty topic, and definitely could see this spinning off into all kinds of like subtopics. But yeah, this is definitely a good start, is just to think about how we measure change that can create risk or identify patterns where we can make those changes visible. So I really appreciate that. And not to get too hung up on the measuring part, I think also just generally, how do we think about risk? How do we talk to our partnerships about risk? Folks have different languages, and sort of traversing across those, translating those languages, and having a shared way to think about risk, I think is important. Not always easy though.
No, not easy. But there's a couple of things, right? One is that you don't need to talk about risk in sophisticated language. You can talk about it in simple language. Jen Cardello talks about just sitting down with every key stakeholder and asking them what's keeping them up at night. What do they think the biggest risks are for their initiatives for the next 6 months? And then working on a research agenda that is specifically aimed at, in essence, testing hypotheses against those risks, right? If they think that the biggest risky thing is they're going to build this thing and put it out there and no one's going to use it, suddenly you can formulate a research plan around, well, how would we tell that before we invested in it fully? Mitigating risk means if it's not going to be used, we cut that off way earlier than getting a month after it and canceling the whole network, right? It's going to be figuring out that we haven't hit the right thing. But if you do the research right, not only will you discover that what you were thinking of shipping wasn't going to work, but you're probably going to find out, well, what would work? And so just asking that question about what keeps you up at night, what are the biggest risks that you can think of, is there. But there's another technique, which is a technique that I've seen used in a lot of places called a pre-mortem. We're used to postmortems, where after a project, we go through and we say, well, what went wrong? And what could we have done better? In a pre-mortem, you actually, before the project starts, ask, what are all the ways this project could go wrong? And you start to catalog that. And again, we're not using sophisticated language. We're just trying to brainstorm on all the places this could fail. And then we can ask the question, one item at a time, well, how would we tell if we were going in that direction? What would be the early signals that could tell us that that's where we're heading? And then how could we use those signals to get a different direction? And that's how research can help with risk. Does that help?
Yes, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Jared.
You're welcome. We should do a whole session on this. I agree. We will do a whole session on this.
Awesome.
Okay, I know there are questions we didn't get a chance to answer. Please, by all means, put your questions into the Leaders of Awesomeness, create a little article, post it in there. I will answer it. If you haven't yet, please sign up for our intensive next week. Every session will be recorded. Each session is twice a day. You can be part of that. Of course, if you join the VIP program, you'll get even more support. If you are ready to really make research a bigger, better thing in your organization, you can have that happen by just joining the VIP program. It's really a good bargain. Go for that. And I hope we'll see you soon. Between now and the next time we meet, please go out and make some awesomeness.